Ngā mihi kia ora koutou katoa. My name's Neil Pavia-Smith, and tonight we're actually addressing one of the very common themes that has come through all of those panel discussions and from feedback that many of us have had, that being the city's affordability, its finances, our rates, and the options we have around those issues, whether it's our current rates bill, the commercial rate load, our future rates, the city's balance sheet. How can we afford things that matter today, be that water or the various other key services, or how do we look to afford the things that we all might want to see that will kick the city along into the future? The ideas that are flowing enormously out of these panel sessions that we've been having across this series we've been hosting. So tonight, I'm really delighted to bring together, they'll probably say coerce, maybe I was just persuasive, a terrific group of really dedicated Wellingtonians to present their ideas and analysis and insights about what some of the opportunities are. Now I want to give you a bit of a pre-warning here. Some of this is a bit of a reality check, right? We all know the numbers are a bit grim, it's all a bit gloomy, but the message is this: they are what they are, and there's going to be a bit of a presentation on where we're at and what the trajectory looks like. And so while all of that might come across as a bit gloomy, what we're going to hear tonight, and the focus of tonight, is about the opportunities that come from where we're at. Essentially, the vision for an affordable future and a thriving city. So the panel here have spent, I can tell you, a lot of time researching and preparing for this discussion. And I'd just like to acknowledge them for their willingness to be on this panel, to front in a public manner such as this, and also for their efforts. And I hope that you find their insights and their ideas really thought-provoking and stimulating. Now, before I introduce the panel and pass over to Fran O'Sullivan, our moderator for this evening, I'd just like to outline how this evening will flow. So Fran will kick off shortly, and then we'll turn to our speakers. Can I also just acknowledge the presence tonight of Gareth Parry from PwC. So you're going to see Gareth in front of this whiteboard. He does this amazing sort of cartoon capturing all the ideas sort of thing, which is really valuable, and so you'll see him furiously drawing away on the screens, capturing all the ideas and so on. Tonight is also being filmed and will be able to be replayed for those who weren't able to make it. So with that in mind, I'd just like to introduce our wonderful panel, and I'll do that in the order in which they are going to speak. And first up, our moderator, Fran O'Sullivan. Now, Fran probably needs a little introduction. She's, without doubt, New Zealand's most influential and leading business journalist. She's been doing it for a very long time. She's also a committed Wellingtonian, whilst having been based in Auckland. She's part of the Vision for Wellington team. And I know, having worked alongside her in other activities for a number of years, she's a real authority on business and finance and politics. So, Fran, thank you for coming tonight and being willing to moderate. To her left, Brad Olsen. Brad will be a very familiar face if you've been on any sort of news channel over a number of years. He's, of course, the Chief Executive and Principal Economist of Infometrics, a leading economics and advisory business based in Wellington, and Brad brings really clear perspectives on economics and business trends and other analysis. He's much sought after commentator on these types of issues. He's authored reports on regional business, regional well-being and so on. He was a Young Wellingtonian of the Year about 5 years ago. He's a JP, and all of that, believe it or not, he's only 28 years old. Pretty extraordinary. And I'm delighted they're both here because they've been up at field days and they flew back early to come here tonight, so thank you both. Paul Ridley-Smith, Paul is the former chair of Manawa Energy. You might have known that as Trust Power one day. He's also been involved with companies such as Arvida, been on the board of Wellington International Airport. He was General Counsel of Contact Energy. For a long term, he was a senior member of the Morrison & Co. Team, an amazing Wellington success story, global investment bank. And perhaps his most august position, he now chairs the Oriental Bay Residents Association. And Paul is an expert on matters around city funding and infrastructure and so on, so his insights will be really valuable. Then we have Louise Tong. Now Louise is the Director of Sustainability at Infratil. Again, another amazing Wellington company, and she's been there a number of years and has her focus very much around finance and risk and so on. Before that, she was at the Bank of New Zealand in charge of sustainable finance. She's had a long career in banking. She set up New Zealand's Green Bond program. She's been involved with Contact Energy's liquidity and risk and funding programs, and an extensive career in financial markets. And interestingly, she was also on Auckland City's Treasury Management steering group, so has a real understanding of local authority finances and so on. And then Julie Moore. Now, you may have seen Julie if you've been to Moore Wilson's, one of Wellington's most loved and celebrated retail institutions. Julie, of course, is the managing director and co-owner of Moore Wilson's, a 107-year-old Wellington institution, fourth generation business, and Julie is a frequent sought-after commentator on issues affecting city businesses and retail and those sorts of trends in changing consumer patterns and so on, and her perspective and experience around a long-established business in the city around growth and investment and some of those changing trends will be really insightful as well. So that's the order of proceedings. Please keep your questions flowing, and with that introduction, I'm pleased to hand over to Fran. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my great pleasure to be here tonight, and we've both been down at field days or up at field days, so a little bit of concern about the weather and getting in and getting back, but it's wonderful to be here. Quick change for my friend here, for Brad, getting in. Brad is, he tells me, a Wellingtonian by adoption, came here to university, never left, so I think that makes him a Wellingtonian. He is a big picture thinker. He tends to paint an optimistic picture as well, so over to you.
Thank you, Fran, and kia ora and good evening, everyone. It is great to be here, although quite a contrast coming down from field days where the agricultural sector's in a much better spot. We see that across the country, and I think it's challenging to come back to Wellington because there is both a general urban challenge for the national economy at the moment. It's not just Wellington that's feeling the brunt. The likes of Auckland, Christchurch and the likes are still being hit. But it's fascinating when I've gone through the data that we compile at Infometrics on how different parts of the economy are going. The rural sector definitely better at the start of 2025, urban definitely in a more challenging, tough position. But then going down into the details, Wellington City hurt and being hit even more than that, down about 1.6%. On average over the last year. The national downturn was down 1.1%. So a harder hit already starting to emerge that highlights, I think, a general sort of trend over time. I remember when I moved to Wellington back a decade ago for university, and I came here, it was the only place that I'd ever thought of moving to. I applied to Victoria University of Wellington and sort of had no complete idea of where I'd end up, certainly didn't think I'd be at Infometrics, but I came here because this is where the action happens. This is where the powerful decisions get made that have an influence not only on the city itself, but wider for the rest of the country. This is, of course, the capital city, and I feel like both we sometimes forget that, and certainly higher up decision makers sometimes forget it too. For Wellington over the last couple of years and still present at the moment, there's a few challenges that are both shared with other areas, but again, when we look into some of the data and some of the numbers, it becomes clear that Wellington has some of those tougher operating conditions to start with, and we haven't been able to help ourselves quite as much as other areas. You look at the last couple of years with high inflation and then high mortgage rates that have been coming through has been contributed a hit across the country. No part of New Zealand has escaped that. People have been paying higher and higher mortgage rates, and there hasn't been as much money flowing through into other parts of the economy. For most urban centres, Wellington and others, you've also seen the shift towards working from home. Fewer people then coming into our major CBD areas, spending money, participating, contributing, and allowing that momentum to keep going. And then, of course, for Wellington, on top of that, on top of both of those, you've had the likes of the job losses that have emerged as central government has made changes. You've seen the likes of both government roles directly, but also the private sector who support government here in Wellington being hit. And so there is a bit of a triple threat that's come through for Wellington, plus the more general difficulty where costs have been going up across the board, be that anything from insurance to, yes, clearly rates. And I'll let others on the panel discuss that as we get going. I think it's important, though, from my point of view, not that we don't overblow the challenges that are coming through, because sometimes I do feel, as a Wellingtonian, that they become insurmountable. And there are times, I think, in some of the commentary that we put out where I go, why are we trying to save this place? Because the numbers sound so grim. But I'm eternally optimistic that we can turn things around, that there are better times coming, and that some of that is naturally going to come through. But for Wellington, we've also sort of got to take the bull by the horns and make some of those changes. Remember at the end of last year, another economist came out and said, look, based on some of the data he'd got, Wellington had lost 10% of its employment. And I remember thinking at the time, I know it's bad, but it's certainly not 1 in 10. You would see that, you'd feel it on the streets, we just wouldn't be here tonight. And so it did highlight, though, the number of people that jumped on that bandwagon and said, yes, we've seen this huge collapse, 20,000 jobs gone. And I went, you guys are just buying into the idea that Wellington is dead, dying and gone. And we're not. We have actually some of the best economic, solid foundations that you can find across the country. New Zealand's got, Wellington rather, has the most creative population that we've got across New Zealand. Just under 7% of our employment is directly in the creative sector. We've got the highest skilled population in the country, the highest incomes, the best productivity. So we've got a very good solid foundation from which we start. But we've got some challenges too. The cost pressures that are clearly evident, but also things like lower home ownership rates. It's pretty hard to keep people committed here when they're not that keen or able to buy a house. We know that Wellington's had the lowest population growth, in fact the only outright decline of all of the major local authorities across the country. The only other territorial authority that lost population between 2018 and 2023 was the Chatham Islands. We're in bad company at that point. And with that, we know as well that the falling population, there are, again, some common themes you see across the country, but it's Wellington's young people that we're losing. Both young people in terms of the up-and-comers, hopefully like myself, but also the young ones. And if you're not keeping the young ones here, it means that your families are shifting, and people are voting effectively with their feet that now and here is not the place necessarily to be. But like I say, I do think we've got some solid economic foundations that come through, and importantly, some stuff that we can do ourselves. Three broad areas from me that I think will be themes throughout the night at different points. The first is that we've got to act like a capital city and a little bit demand that those who occupy the capital city, being central government politicians, give us our dues, because we're just not seeing that to quite the same degree. We seem to be taken a little bit for granted because of how close we are to the beehive and similar. That both means that we need to get a better outcome from central government, but we also need to act like they're willing to actually talk to us and give us that better deal. We know that from a local council point of view that there is a need to support businesses to provide the right conditions so that when people are looking at where they're locating their business, where they're starting to create a family, this is the place to do it. On some hands, I think we're moving into a better position over time. Housing outcomes in Wellington are looking up when we eventually start to get momentum going, but by goodness, it's hard as a business to go, well, where would I base myself at the moment with the highest rates differential in the country? But the biggest one I think that comes through for me is that it's very easy sometimes to pass the buck and say that it's all other people's fault, it's central government, local government, anyone else's. You look across the world at the moment, it's easy to blame other countries too. But I think there's a real opportunity for private businesses as well in Wellington to keep going, to find some of that momentum themselves and think about how they prepare for the future. Wellington as a region is changing. We're seeing more of the activity come out to the rest of Wellington region and less have been concentrated on the city. That means that although we might not be able to stop all of it, we've certainly got to make sure that we double down on the areas that we do well in. That is the creative sector, it's technology, it's the professional workers that we have, and using those smart skills that we've clearly got before we lose them. Because I do think we're now into a position where it is a bit more use it or lose it, and I definitely don't want to be in that position. I came to Wellington a decade ago because this was the place to be, this was the place where you made things happen, and I very much think it still is. We have had a tough couple of years of it, some of that not of our own making, some of it which we seem to have doubled down on. But I am eternally optimistic that we can not only turn things around, but continue to create that great vibe that drew me here in the first place, I expect drew most of you here in the first place, and will continue to ensure that future Kiwis and those overseas think that this is the capital city that is the best of the lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad, for kicking us off in such an optimistic manner. Paul is now going to paint the numbers.
Hose you down, yeah, exactly.
No. Reality check. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Look, when Neil first asked me to do this, it was a bit like sort of getting excited about the school dance when you're 18, and then you spend the next 2 weeks thinking, God, I do not want to go to the school dance. But I'm here now. And look, there is some misery coming, so brace yourself. But I know that you don't actually want to come here and listen to 10 minutes of misery and unhappiness. You want to hear some good news stories. And Louise is the sort of Batman is following with the good news stories. But it's really important that you do understand the state of the play, what's happened over the next 5 years and what's forecast to happen over the next 5 years. And if I can leave you with a couple of important messages. Some people in this audience and some people listening will just think there's some privileged guy who's standing in front of you and he's about to whinge about his rates because his rates have gone from 8,000 to 12,000 and they're heading to 20,000. That's true, it is. That's not true. That's not why any of us are standing up here. It's not about us, it's about the city. And people who are concerned about the city have to reclaim the narrative that the fairest, the most decent, the most caring, and the most empathetic thing that our city leadership can do is deal with the rates crisis. Because people out there on low incomes, people out there in the lower deciles, people out there who are wanting to buy a house and save up and start a business, they are suffering, and they can't do it because of there's other factors, but a significant contributing factor is the loss of financial control by this council. So Jacinda's book is number 3 on the New York Times best-selling list today, in case you want to know. Empathy is important, but it's got to start at home now, and it's got to be started at the leadership of the council. The next thing I want you to be left with is that actions at the margin matter. So on average, Felicity and I, we're not leaving the town, we'll pay up, we'll pay the rates. But people who are starting a business and people who are thinking about a new career or people who are looking at saying, shall I expand, shall I employ the next person, they must and always do look forward to see what are the costs going to be, what's my revenue going to be. And when you see that your rates have gone up 55% over the last 5 years and are going up another 77% before 2030, and you factor that into your business decisions, you pause. So the approach we've taken to date is actually counterproductive to where the progressives in the city want to take us. They're not actually adopting policies that allow the city to go ahead. That's the trajectory we're on. So that's the takeaways. If we can now, that's the emotional start. And can we now bring up some of the slides? Well, I'll give you some numbers. And I'm not going to get too much into the numbers because, it's a little too much. The important one about this one here is where does the money come from? Is that laser going to work? There it is there. The takeaway here is that revenue for the city comes from a variety of sources. When spending goes up, obviously revenue has to come up. But most of those revenue items, that one there, actually you can't raise it that much. You can't put parking up in the central city to $12 an hour. You can't put the dog fees up. There is actually a response that won't let it. Grants and subsidies come from central government. That doesn't go up much either. It's this one. So every time the expenditure goes up, this one has to go up proportionately more. It's the only one that you can be compulsorily made to pay. And that's exactly what's been happening over the last few years. As I say, they've gone up 55% since 2019. They're going up 77% by 2030. Next one, where does it go? Who's controlling that? Not me again, is it? I thought they were doing it from the back. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but that's broadly where it goes, suppliers and contractors and bits and pieces. The reason why I want to put that up is a theme I'm going to come to later, is that the growth in it is, it's better illustrated on the next one. This is where by activity where it goes. Where the growth in the spending has gone has been in what I would call the non-core items. You know, it's a myth that it's gone on three waters. It hasn't gone up on parks and stuff. Well, it's gone up at about the rate of inflation over the last 5 years. Inflation's been 23%. So those ones have... so it's gone down 2%, that one there. It's 20% of the total, but it's down 2%. The extra spending has gone into what are the four well-beings, and I'll come to that later. Now, I put this up. It's always a little bit of a cheap shot to beat up on the staff. And I genuinely not. I don't want to. If there's council people here, there's no criticism. But the problem is that when you employ a whole lot more people, so this is, by the way, it's Greater Wellington Regional Council, that one there, and Wellington City Council is there. When you expand the payroll, and over 5 years we've expanded the cost 48%, and you employ good people, that multiplies through to the spending. Once you put the people in there, they will itself generate more and generate more projects. So the expansion of the payroll and the expansion of the number of people is indeed part of the problem. Comparatives. Are we really worse than other cities? Oh, yes, we are. We weren't. So what colour are we? We're that green there. So we kind of tracked away on operating costs per capita with the pack. But this is a race that you don't want to win. Starting at about 2019, and I'll come back to that, we took the lead by quite a substantial margin, and we're forecast to... I mean, we're the length of the straight against ahead of our peers. So again, don't believe the myth that it's just kind of happening the same all over the country and that we're not an outlier. We absolutely are. Fran said, reduce the rate story to something that I can understand. Fair enough too. Well, I don't mean that diminutively. So reduce it to a house. Louise found this house here. This is a cute two-bedroom villa in Newtown. There's there. Current rates are $7,040. By the way, you own it. It's a Wellington City Council property. It's part of our social housing portfolio, just by the by. And there's what's happening to the rates on that house. What they were back in 2019, that number there, a little bit less than 4,000, including Greater Wellington. 2024, they're 7,000, and 2030, that's sort of like to go to, heading to about 12. So again, if you're feeling it, you're not making it up. It's true, it's happening, and it's going to keep on happening. So that's exactly what's happening at your personal level. Then the affordability, and this is where I really come back to the important point about what's fair, what is empathetic, and what is the right thing to do, is how those rates are affecting people on household working income there and people retirees. And that's those numbers there are the proportion of the income that you used to pay after tax on rates, and that's where it's going, doubling in real terms. And if you're two retirees on the pension, it's going to 22% just for rates on that villa in Newtown. Now, rates probably are, for some people, the second or third largest household expense. You've got your mortgage. It's more than your utilities, it's more than your internet, it's more than your electricity, it's more than your clothing, it's probably more than your transport. So increases of the scale we've seen and increasing to that percentage really, really matters. And why it also matters for young people is this number up here, this $64,000. I said before that the affordability for young people who we want in the city, we want it to grow, we want the 50,000 that are planned, depends on them being able to buy a property. In constant terms today, if those rates increases happen, a young person today or couple will need $64,000 more as a deposit to afford the same house. That's how much you are going to have to save more to buy the same house if we stay on that trajectory. And if anybody thinks saving that much extra is easy, well, I've got another bridge to sell you. For businesses, it's even worse. God, you'll have seen, I'll just go quickly to the next slide. You saw this, if you did, you probably saw this, I don't, with Ethan Manawa, so that's a Herald reporter comparing the average rates in Wellington with the average rates elsewhere. Again, a race we don't want to win. We're basically double Christchurch, or more than double Christchurch. And if we just go back on the slide, that's the trajectory for a business. Which business is that, Louise? Oh,
It's just an average-sized business.
Average-sized business.
Relative to the
yeah, about a $4 million property, wasn't it? About a $4 million property. I had a guy talk to me the other day that his rates have gone from 20,000 to 59,000, and I said, oh, well, I hope you can suck up the 59 because they're going up another 77% in 5 years. And he was just like crestfallen. But that's the trajectory we're on. And that's the comparison again. What's happened with the council is that every year the councillors say we're putting too much burden onto the commercial sector. We're charging them 3.7 times the residential. They all want to reduce it, but they can't because it means transferring to the residents, and the residents vote more than the commercial, so it becomes a politically impossible thing to do. Well, it shouldn't be. Debt. Oops, sorry, gone back. Yeah. That's the trajectory. Pre-COVID, debt was sitting at around 600 million. It's about 1.4, 1.5 at 30 June last year. 30 June this year is not yet out, but we think it's going to north of 2 billion, and it's heading to 2.5 billion only in 2026 on that one. A myth developed in COVID times that debt doesn't matter. That is such bollocks. That is such complete crap. I'll come to this. Debt matters because the higher your debt, the greater the proportion of the rates you pay today is to pay the interest. So again, oops, sorry, got the wrong slide. Are they there? So again, looking at that. So previously, Greater Wellington, by the way, is even worse. Last year, $1.05 of the rates you paid to Greater Wellington was just to pay the interest on the debt. It used to be sitting there at about 8% for Wellington. It's gone up to 12 or 14%, so about $1.08 is actually paying. And the only reason that line goes flat is because rates are increasing at such a rate that the ratio stays broadly constant. Again, if you just combine OPEX and CAPEX together, again, we take the lead. We're up there at the top there, with that green line at the top. And so again, that's the burden that we've got in our city. So enough of that. I know it's miserable as can be, I understand. The question is, you would ask, is why? What happened to make Wellington such an outlier that caused such an expansion starting in 2019? And the answer is that in 2019, the Local Government Act changed to introduce this concept of four well-beings. And Wellington being the city it is, political city, dominated in an electoral sense by the left, and that's just a matter of fact, they've just gone charged at the door and say, we're spending and we're growing in the four well-beings. So when you then go to, and that is effectively the climate change, the social housing, the broader things beyond the parks and the pipes. So previously, when the Local Government Act said your obligation as councillors was to be efficient, effective and appropriate, now, and our council has sort of leapt at this, is to play a broad role in promoting the social, economic and environmental cultural well-being of their communities, taking a sustainable development approach. Some of you will like that. I'm not trying to make a political point. I mean, that might be entirely consistent with your value set, but it doesn't come for free. And what I ask those people who think that that is the right approach, that those four well-beings approach, is really balance out the adverse consequences for society, the adverse consequences for citizens, because to pay for it, you've got to push the rates like we've pushed. To sort of illustrate that I'm not sort of kind of making it up, if you go to any council documents to try and get an idea of what motivates them, this is the strategy section from the LTP plan published last year. And again, it's a little hard to read, but I can assure you that it's very substantially weighted to the four well-beings. There is nothing in there about efficiency, economic growth, about how we can improve the overall welfare of our cities by relieving the financial burden. It's everything about aspiration. Again, that might suit your political views, it might suit your societal views, but just understand the cost. Oh, there we go. I've come to the end. On that note, Louise. Now, Louise is now going to give you a whole lot of solutions. Okay. Thank you.
People want us to stand when they speak because they can't see people at the back.
Okay. I do start on a bit more doom and gloom before I come to some solutions, so keep bracing yourself. But can we get to calmer waters? Absolutely we can, but it will take some courage, some focus and a genuine desire for change. But Paul's painted a pretty alarming financial picture, and he's right. Things are bad. On the left-hand graph here, you can see the annual costs to run the council. From 2022 to 2026, where the red arrow sits, costs have gone up 86%. That's nearly doubling in 4 years. But the council has also gone on a long-term spending spree. As you can see in the graph on the right, that's the sludge plant, the town hall, the library, the cycleways, et al., all sunk decisions. But you'd think, if you'd just cleaned out your bank account on some pretty big investments, you might tighten your purse strings for a few years. Not the council. They are carrying on with that spending spree, with capital projects still running at 4 times what they were 5 years ago. Oh, but what about the pipes, I hear you say? The pipes are a problem, but they are not the problem. You can see from the orange bars there, they run on average at about 25% of the total investment going forward. However, we can turn things around. So let's walk through it. How do we get to a better city? Firstly, and this is a mindset thing as much as anything, ratepayers need to be able to trust that the council is spending each and every dollar really carefully. There are too many instances where this is just not the case. The examples here, while not big in and of themselves, collectively would pay for the council to meet its commitment to the Karori Event Centre twice over. So it's about a mindset. It's about showing that ratepayers' money and commitments are being treated with respect. So A, X poor value spending. B, the basics matter. It's what the residents really care about. They need to be the core focus of the council. They need to be done well, and they need to be done efficiently. It's just litter, leaves, lights, water, waste, and weeds. There's too much money, too much time and effort going on too many other things, which brings me to my third leg. We need to course correct. This is the big critical thing. Residents and businesses simply cannot sustain the forecast expenditure. So to course correct the ship, there are 5 big levers that could be pulled. So on the next 5 slides, I'm going to give you 5 big numbers highlighted in yellow. So if you've got your phones out, get your calculators at the ready and tally up the numbers as we go. Lever number 1, salaries. As Paul mentioned, the council staff costs have gone up 54% in 5 years to 2024. That is twice the rate of inflation. If we carry on that trajectory and even taper off a bit at the end, we end up on the blue line at the top. An alternative might be to use a sinking lid for a few years. The council turnover is 17%, not replacing some staff when they leave, and perhaps some restructures of some areas where there's not value being delivered. So if we do that, if we don't replace some staff when they leave, and costs drop, say, 9 to 10% for the next couple of years per annum, and then rise again at a modest, more acceptable 3%, we end up on the orange line. The difference, and I had to keep checking this because it just seems so big, the difference between those two is over $700 million over the next 8 years. It's not radical, it's entirely feasible. Lever number 2 is social housing. Look, we all agree housing is important, social housing is important, but it is not the council's role to provide these things. Wellington stands alone in providing social housing. It's the second largest social housing provider in the country, behind Kāinga Ora. Council, instead, should keep the city affordable through reasonable rates, through efficient consenting and sensible zoning. Central government provides social housing. The current council is planning to spend $910 million of your money on social housing. A big chunk of that is upgrading, that they're looking at right now, is upgrading 800 odd units at an average cost of $500,000 per unit. How many of you could afford a $500,000 renovation right now? Well, you're paying for one, it's just not at your house. Okay, there's a lot of activity on this slide. That's because there are so many areas where the council needs to run a ruler or some common sense over their plans. The council, as I said, has too many projects and is spread too thinly, and it all adds up to excessive rates, poor governance and poor outcomes. So I'll just touch on a couple here. Sorry, they're not that easy to read. And I'll point out the total, $788 million. So seismic upgrades. The council's been beavering away for a while now, spending lots of money, I'm sure, on engineering reports, on seismic upgrades or demolition of Michael Fowler, Opera House, Freiburg and Wellington Museum. At the same time, just down the road here, the government is undertaking a seismic risk review, which could mean that all the work the council's currently doing just goes out the window. I think it might be a wise thing to perhaps down pens and wait for the outcome of the review, which will likely put us on a more sensible path cost-wise. The second item I'll touch on is the poor value spend, future spend. So along with a myriad of ways to give away your ratepayer money, the council is also proposing to spend $50 million more on reserve land. I love reserve land, I love open spaces, but we already have 3,000 hectares of reserves. That's 140 square metres for each and every person in the city. So given the council's already falling behind on maintaining what it's got, further acquisitions are just not a good idea. Finally, libraries and pools. Look, they're important community facilities, and I'm not suggesting we close them, but they seem to cost an extraordinary amount to run, particularly compared to other councils. Okay. Oops, sorry. Number 4. So as well as those savings, there are some other areas of significant expenditure that could be pivoted. One idea that's had a bit of press lately, that I personally like, is a nature network or a greenbelt cycleway. There is still $173 million of cycleway spending in the long-term plan, if you look hard enough. Why not put that aside and just build a city-wide greenbelt cycling network? Not only would it be an enjoyable, safe option for commuters, it could also be a real tourist attraction. Takina, lovely building, but basically financially unviable. The council solution is to whack ratepayers with another 152 million of subsidies. Instead, the business case needs to be dusted off, have a serious rethink, or perhaps even sell it. Finally, the zoo. So last long-term plan, we were subsidising the zoo $80 million. Roll forward 3 years, and now that's $120 million to watch some caged monkeys and some shivering sub-Saharan cats. Zealandia is so much more relevant to our city. It's a unique tourist attraction, so let's focus our efforts and our money there. At what point do we stop subsidising a zoo? When at the next long-term plan when it's 160? At the following long-term plan when it's 200 million? Anyway, there's another 361 million. Last lever. As well as saving some money, by its own admission, the council could do with some more money coming in the door from sources other than rates. So here's some ideas. The biggest one is road reserves. The council could actively embark on a sale program. This would give a big dollop of cash in, as well as protecting revenue. People would just pay slightly more rates, instead of paying a road reserve fee. But they would get to use their land properly for a garage, a sleep out, a vegetable garden. It's a win-win. And finally, I'll touch on the last point here. The council keeps giving more and more properties rates for emission, including 300 more properties, estimated, in the last long-term plan. They need to review all properties that are exempt from rates or getting rates for emission, including the government properties, and look to claw back some more revenue. Okay, drum roll, how much have we got? Has anyone added it up? No? Quite crap. 2.8 billion that all comes to. It seems a lot. I couldn't believe it when I added this up. I had to really check my figures. But when you put it in context, it all seems a little more feasible. So the graphs I showed earlier are here. Effectively, those costs would just take us down to the yellow lines. Not slashing and burning, not cutting services. In fact, I think you'd get an improvement, given the council would be more laser-focused on the things that matter. And most importantly, it would mean not burdening ratepayers, businesses and renters anymore. But it's not just about catching our collective breath, it's about the opportunity that this unlocks. Look, affordability is intrinsic to our city being attractive to visit, to live in and to run a business. Wellington's got so many advantages that it can leverage to get it out of its funk. So let's look at a few. Tourism is a massive growth opportunity for our city. In the last resident survey, 93% of people said tourism is great for Wellington, and yet our international tourism numbers have fallen. The long-term plan does not once mention destination, tourism, international arrivals. Where is the focus to build the number of tourists coming to our city? We need to invest in our gateways, get some edgy cut-through campaigns and get some events happening. Auckland is currently hosting a century of modern art. Why is it not here? The second one, our setting is our superpower. Wrapped in the embrace of land and sea, Wellington's a place where nature and city life are uniquely intertwined. The resident survey showed that only 50% of people feel pride in the way Wellington looks and feels currently. Let's tidy the place up. Let's make it safer. Let's think a bit more creatively about how we can get the most out of this incredible asset, from a nature network of cycleways without forking out billions, to using our places and spaces for music residencies and gig. Why don't we have a great walk in our region? Let's talk to the government about that. Which leads to my third point. We need to demonstrate that we're financially responsible to earn a place at the table with government. Once we do that, we can then work closer with them to do some city deals on social housing. We should be actively lobbying to ensure we get a fair contribution and support for our tourism ambitions. This is a gem of an opportunity that we are just not capitalising on. My final point, and crucially, an affordable city with a council that appreciates the role of business and is great to deal with, is a city where businesses will want to start up, they will want to stay, and they will grow. That's I'll hand over to Julie on that point.
Thank you. Well, I'm not sure. I'm probably going to talk a little differently to the rest of the panel. We've got some pretty impressive, and I guess for me, this is not what I would normally do in my day, but, I enjoy talking to people in Wellington, and that's probably what I do most days, talking to my customers. And I've been working in Wellington in my business for 34 years, so I've seen a lot of change in that time. We're a Wellington family-owned grocer, proud grocers. Yeah, and for us, I feel people come to our business because we've created a unique city retail experience. We're a place not just to shop, but I feel that a place to meet, people come to us for social connection, and I talk to my customers on a daily basis about what's happening in Wellington and what's happening in the world. Wellington is often called a capital village, and we see that, and we're proud to be part of it. Yeah. We're also proud of the contributions that we make to the city. For us, it is having offering a service, having a destination, employing people, having the ability to, do sponsorships towards different causes, whether it's in the arts or education or health. That's what motivates us in business. Yeah, and I think maybe one of the reasons I thought was of value to come here is just to talk a little bit about, I think there's often a misconception about our business. A lot of people come to Olsen's on a Saturday and they see lots of customers and they think, oh my gosh, these guys are doing great, fantastic. But the reality is very different. Like everyone else, we're finding that it is not easy. We've probably had the most challenging, tough trading in the last, 2 years that I've ever experienced in the 34 years that I've been in this business in Wellington. And there's different reasons for that. One is what I would call probably a national, and one is more local. New Zealand is coming out of recession, but there's still a little way to go, and confidence remains pretty low, and spending is way down on both retail and hospitality. A lot of people probably don't realise our business is probably 60% hospitality or food service, 40% retail, and we see people are not coming into Wellington City. We see the numbers. And we see the spend. Yeah. But the other thing that we're facing, and I think it's just talking about the cost of doing business, is the local kind of challenge. The cost of doing business in Wellington is quite unique to any other city in New Zealand. One would be insurance. We've all been talking about that, the big one's coming, and we pay for that. We pay around $1 million in insurance a year. We've looked at lots of creative ways to do that, even self-funding. But that is double what, if we were a business in Auckland, what we would pay. I can't control that. Another one is rates, and we've talked a bit about rates tonight. So business rates account for 50%, close to 48% of what, the total rates that the council receive, whereas Auckland Christchurch is probably closer to 30%. Our businesses, we pay just under $1 million just for our TRO properties in Wellington, to Wellington City Council. that doesn't count what we pay in rates to Pororua, Lower Hutt and Wairarapa councils. Yeah, so I think people need to recognise the challenges that businesses have, and certainly, but another challenge is as the size of our population. I mean, we only have a population in the city of just over 400,000, and that makes for a lot less people and a much smaller market and more challenges. And then I guess there's the other thing that I wanted to talk about was specifically more the local conditions that make it harder to do business, that don't need to be the way they are. I thought I'd give an example of that. So in 2022, Mawawsons was poised to go full steam ahead with an ambitious project that we've done a lot of research and put a lot of energy into, and it represented a $30 million investment in our business in central Wellington and Te Aro. The plan was to extend our site in Eastwood along Lawn Street, creating a large vertical garden that would fill. The vertical garden would be the whole upper level. The produce that we grew, we would, harvest and sell in our store on a daily basis. And, there's a lot of these large urban gardens overseas, and it was a natural fit for our business. And, we all need to be looking at, where food is grown, and it's an important, part of the economy. And it would have been a first in New Zealand. We shared our plans, and these are some images of Lawn Street development. We went to application meetings for resource consent, and we showed these plans to Wellington City Council. And not long after we had shown them, it was about the time when the Golden Mile project was being put forward, and we did a bit of research and we looked at those plans, and we discovered that part of the plan was to basically close Tory Street. Part of Tory Street was going to be completely closed off, make it a dead-end street. And, Wellington is an accessible city, and that's what makes it really special. And we know where our customers are, where they come from, and that would have, taken away access to half of our customers. So we were pretty shaken by that, to think that is basically a council can do that without any thought. I don't know whether there's any thought regard to the consequences of doing that. So as a result of that, we shelved those redevelopment plans. I guess you might ask, did anyone from the council ever actually contact us after that? Sadly, no. So it was kind of it was pretty, it really made us make decisions about going forward. And for us, we just are not going to ever invest and, develop our business in an environment that, treats businesses the way. So I guess what leads me to say, all we seek from our city is to recognise the contribution local businesses make, the cost and challenges that it is to do business in our city. And that they should be working for us and alongside us. It doesn't seem like much of an ask. But that was an example, it's, of a council that, we've been here in Wellington for 107 years. We employ 300 people. We were looking to invest and employ a lot more people. But there's not one single person at Wellington City Council showed it was, any interest, or which does tell us something. It's not a good environment. But what for me, and because I guess I
talk with people for the size of our city, which is very small. We've got some incredible people in Wellington, in proportion, I always say, and I'm lucky enough to see and talk to, engage with those people, all the time. And, whether that be the film industry, the tech, the sports, the arts scene. We've always had the embassies here in Wellington. And the running of our country happens here. We're the capital city with a lot of special people. And we also, we talked about, we have this most beautiful geographic city, walking city, and that's probably why we've all kind of stayed. And I know I love Wellington. I've lived here all my life, and we want to see it thrive, but, there needs to be, at least we need a council that even notices that businesses even exist. Yeah, and their decision, the consequences, of those decisions. Anyway, thank you for,
Thank you.
We're lucky to have so many people that care about Wellington.
Thank you so much, Julie. You've shared a pretty special story, and it's heart-rending to actually find that council didn't even give you the time of the day on this. And you have to wonder how many other examples of what people want to do have been stifled in this city. So we've had a very interesting conversation. We've very upbeat from Brad. We've looked about the scale of the issues that face us in terms of the money and where we get it from, and also Louise's ABC, how we find that $2.8 billion, which all of you applauded. And obviously there's some tough choices around that. But I think just talking across the panel, number of questions have come through, and you can get up there for the QR code. But and I guess if we just start, what comes forward, and a question from Henry Peach: how do we educate more people about public sector finances, especially regarding the challenges councils face with unfunded mandates? Who would like to pick that one up? And if you wouldn't mind standing up, because people at the back can't see you.
I think Louise.
Yeah.
Sure, sorry.
Yeah.
Pleasingly, the government is reviewing the purpose of council under the Local Government Act. I think looking to take it back to delivering, efficient, effective and appropriate services. And I think as part of, so that's another beacon on the horizon, as part of that they're going to ask for benchmarking reporting. So here's what per library Wellington spends versus Auckland and Christchurch and Hamilton, and here's what, this costs in these different centres. I think that will, transparency will be a huge bonus, and for not only for residents and ratepayers, but I think it will put a lot more accountability, I'm hoping, on the decision makers.
Can I just add to that back, I think it was last year, Local Government New Zealand asked NZIR part of this question: how do you, what are some of the costs of unfunded mandates? It was actually very difficult to find, because funnily enough, central government doesn't send you a bill to local government and says, here are the things that we're asking you to do. Here's an easy one to get through. So I think part of it will be that over time there's got to be a little bit more recognition, like I say, from central government of what they're providing through. Now, not to say at all that rates are cheap, but in New Zealand, local councils collect about 10% of total government collected revenue, but have to look after 25% of infrastructure. Now, there's obviously some different things coming here in Wellington, but it does suggest that, again, there is a real need for central government to come to the party to ensure that not only it's funding the right stuff, but also that it's not foisting more and more things that come through to councils. The benchmarking will be important as well, and I think that will make it a little bit easier. Now, I'm a numbers person. I've got time every day to go through all 78 local council and regional council annual plans, long-term plans, annual reports each year. It would take me, and it has, because I've personally done this, quite a long time to pull together all of those numbers, because for every annual report that a council puts out, Wellington and all the rest, you get 2 years of data if you're lucky. You want to compare that to back in time, you've got to have about 20 different PDFs out over the next wee while. And so I do think it means that we don't make it particularly easy to engage. It's fine for auditors, they do their work and they sign it off, but it doesn't actually mean that the public gets that level of information that we need to over time, because a 2-year snapshot doesn't really cut it. If I went to my board with just a 2-year snapshot, I think I'd get laughed out of the boardroom. That's what we're currently getting though, and like I say, I think that's an across-the-board issue. So with more transparency, it means that we can actually have an informed conversation like you've seen a little bit more here tonight.
Paul, one of the questions has come up about should we merge councils, and for the politicians in the room, this is seen as a mechanism to reduce overheads such as less mayoral and CEO salaries and to spread the costs. What's your view?
Referendum question.
Look, I think I'm going to slightly deflect on that one. I think the real issue that you need to think about now is what's going to happen to water. So what's going to happen, Wellington City Council has decided to transfer its water assets across to a Greater Wellington Regional Council. Well, the Pororua, the two huts, Greater Wellington and Wellington are going to put all the water assets into that operating company. I think that's a mistake. And I'll tell you the reason it's a mistake is that basically what's going to happen is that you're all going to get water bills from that new entity. You as Wellington ratepayers will have no control, because Wellington will only be about 20% of that company, to control how much you are going to be charged for water. So you're going to get the water bill from that company, for which you as a voter can't change that policy. And then you're still going to get your rates bill, and the councillors should be at least reasonably responsive to that. So I think there are governance structure problems with what's planned. To answer the question more directly, if the entire city was put together as a single entity and all of those assets in a single body where actually there was a direct responsiveness to the ratepayers as a whole, then that could possibly work. But I guess in Auckland, there has generally been successful removing the dual council structure. Here, and you might have seen on some of those slides that actually Greater Wellington Regional Council was even worse performer financially than Wellington City Council. So potentially yes, but be wary of the water.
I mean, on that question about the Regional Economic Development Agency as well, ticked up by a number of you here as something you want to know about. Where is this agency and what could it be doing? Any views on that?
They were in my list. It is a bit of a black box, and I didn't have time to go down that rabbit hole, but I don't think we're getting good value for the $150 million that we're spending on sort of, marketing Wellington, if you like, and organising events. We haven't had an event at the stadium or concert in 18 months. And we're paying $150 million for promoting events and tourism for Wellington. I wonder if they could, get a bit more competitive tension and just sort of bin that and go out, have contracts out with the private sector. I don't know. It needs a complete overhaul. It's not value for money. Just on the last point, I would say Wellington Council absolutely should ask its citizens at the next election, because that's the most affordable time to ask, do you think we should amalgamate councils? It would be a lost opportunity not to ask, to find out what people think.
I guess the only other point just on business attraction is similar. I think it'll be a tough ask at the moment to attract or try and do marketing to attract somewhere that's got the highest rates differential in the country. I mean, like the fundamental settings are a bit of a tough one. And I guess the challenge for Wellington going forward, we've had and have at the moment some incredible businesses here. But some of the ones that we talk about as being sort of, Wellington's golden poster boys were literally established before I was born, let alone moved to Wellington. And I guess the question is not so much how do we talk about how great the likes of Weta Workshop is, even Sharesies, which was established, I think, 2017. The question is, what is the next one that we're going to talk about like that, and where is it coming from? Because the challenge at the moment is, with the rates differentials and everything else like that, it is harder to establish a business here than I think people want it to be. If you want to get that economic activity driving, if you want to get the employment, the activity, everything else, you've got the workers for the moment, but they are becoming harder to find as they move away. You've got the productivity, you've got the skills, you've got the incomes to support it. But if you can't make it work with all of those things going because of the other settings, then it's going to be very, very hard to attract businesses in. So get the fundamentals right, and as a business, I'll take those opportunities and I'll happily run with them. But don't, and it's very hard to even get to the starting line.
So I think I misinterpreted that. I was talking about the, the tourism marketing agency. My bad.
Yeah,
But both, it's both though, that's the thing.
I disagree. Broadly, I would shut it down. Because at the end of the day, if we can get the rates under control, if we can put $1,200, each household would be $1,200 better off a year if rates had just gone up at the rate of inflation for the last 5 years. You'd be $2,500 a household better off if rates just stayed at inflation for the next 5 years. You people and the citizens of Wellington can spend that money better. You would pump that money into the economy. You would buy the clothes. You would buy the restaurants, and you would support that marginal business. And that would give the incentive to the employer to add the next person, and the overall welfare effects of the spending that you could control as you contributed to the economy far outweighs what can be done by a few people sitting in office and picking a particular event that they might support.
Question from the floor? No, could you stand up and introduce yourself?
My name is Bill Armour. I've lived in Wellington all my life, and I'm sick of paying all these extra rates and seeing all this money
Can
being
you
wasted.
speak loud?
You're going to change the game, you've got to change the team, you've got to have people who've got the right experience running the council to hold the council people accountable.
Okay, thank you. That's
Yep.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Back to the group. What's your vision across the table on how to encourage more ratepayers to live in the city, and particularly via infill housing? Is that a goer?
Oh, personally, absolutely. I don't want to mow a lawn. I'm serious though. Like, it's one of those things. I am sort of the perfect example of the sort of Wellingtonian that you want increasingly in the future. The person who wants to live here but doesn't want the big outlays. My townhouse that I live in at the moment that is rented. So someone said to me before, "Do you pay rates?" And I was like, not personally, I don't get my rates bill, but I'm pretty sure if I wasn't living there, my landlord at the moment wouldn't have any income to pay it themselves. But it is that sort of thing. Those options are what especially young people are looking for. We know that's the group that we're losing the most. We know that in other parts of the country, particularly other university cities, those are areas where they've been able to dominate. You look at the likes of Hamilton, you look at the likes of Christchurch. In fact, for Hamilton, currently the youngest average population in the country, is on track by 2048 to take over Wellington's current position as the third largest urban centre in the country. That sort of gives you a bit of a steer on if you, again, don't look after your young people, if you don't provide them opportunities, and I think that housing without mowing lawns and other issues is one of them, that's where you start to provide the right sort of change. And I think that, again, we've got some of the right settings at the moment. If you can couple some of that longer term stuff with, again, the fundamentals around business development, job opportunities and similar, then yeah, not only will I stick here, but I think I'll have a lot more friends in the future too, because they'll flock here as we go.
I think this is a sideshow. I think it's a genuine sideshow question. Actually, right now, one of my good friends, Maurice Clark, and his wife Kay, incredibly generous Wellingtonians, they've converted a building on Victoria Street. You know, it's Victoria Street where the McDonald's is in, and you go up there. You would have read in the paper last week, so I'm not revealing anything confidential. It's 53% occupied. There is ample rental accommodation in Wellington at this time. Wellington City Council runs its own, what's it called, Ray? Tikanga, where basically they've done a deal with Ian Castles and Alex Castles where they've basically taken 30-year, I'm not quite sure, head leases of buildings, and so they've guaranteed the income to Castles, and I'm not criticising them, they've just acted like business people, and then they rent them out proudly on the website at below market rents. And then they say to us, it's not costing the ratepayers a dime. Those apartments right now, last Friday, had 10% occupancy. So again, there isn't a shortage.
90.
The problem is 10% vacancy. Sorry, 10% vacancy. The problem actually is that there are no cranes out there. There's only about 3 cranes in Wellington. One building a government building down on Molesworth Street and another one demolishing buildings in Civic Square. What you need to think is actually how to drive people to want to stay and want to invest. That is the critical thing. At the margin, people aren't doing it. And at the meantime, because you're not the 50,000 growth that's in the council plans is Pyrrhic, housing broadly is now not a problem.
Thank you. A great question here for Julie. If you could have it again, or in fact now, what would it take to get your development going, and how much income and jobs would this create? If you could stand.
I guess,
yeah. Thank you.
I mean, for us, we just want to feel secure and confident that we, are not going to have a council that makes decisions that can destroy our business. And, that was a development would have easily employed another, 50-odd people. And it would be the envy of New Zealand because it would be unique. But, we're not going to do something where a council... I sometimes wonder if the council does not care if we close tomorrow. Their complete disregard for, the impact their decision-making has on businesses. Yeah. Yeah, but, we're an accessible... We've always been a very accessible, city, and, people should be... you've got to keep that accessible, whether it be walking or driving or cycling or public transport. But right now, no one wants to shop at more Wilsons because you can't turn into, without avoiding a cycleway, a bus loan or getting a $150 ticket. So people are choosing not to come to our business because of that. Why would you if you can't actually get to us? And, I just think they need to make, think about the decisions they make and the effect it has.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty sobering. Yeah. So we've got a range of questions here, but I'm kind of interested from all of you, just what do you think is a single issue or idea we could do to get some focus on Wellington, and particularly with the government, because this is a capital city. You go elsewhere in the world and, the governments actually do take some pride in their capital cities. Go to Canberra, it's full of stuff. Some views on that. How do we actually engage government to actually think more about the city that they are housed in?
I don't think they even have a conversation, do they? It's not.
Talk to them and get in their faces. They're reviewing the seismic code, and Wellington City Council has a massive seismic problem. Have they gone down the road and talked to them?
I don't think they,
Just talk to them. It's actually not rocket science, but it's communication.
I think we've got to stop giving the central government own goals to sort of kick through. It's pretty easy to find challenges and issues in Wellington because we seem to keep creating them, and then it's very easy for the Prime Minister to stand up, other Cabinet Ministers to stand up and say this is not the easiest place to work with. That's why you see, I think, some of the other interactions with other cities. And it is, I think, like I say, urban centres are hit at the moment. It's not just a Wellington thing, but Wellington is hit worse. The numbers sort of highlight that. Some of that is out of Wellington's control, completely understand that. It's the stuff that's within our control that, again, makes it hard to be taken as seriously. And I don't say that because I think, I do think that Wellington should be first on the phone list, but I get that, look, other regions probably think the same. But at the moment, the fact that we don't make it as easy for ministers, for officials and similar to be part of it, suggests something. The fact that, again, in a lot of the things that Wellington does, a lot of the big civic events and similar, we don't see, key chief executives from government departments or similar who live here, work here, are part of the community, show up into that, suggests that we do have more of a divide than we should. Same with the likes of, university and similar, where, really when we've got all of these great opportunities in the middle of the city, because they're literally part of us, it should be the easiest thing in the world that we seem to, score the own goals where that cooperation goes out the window and the other regions start to cut our lunch. We either sort of sharpen up and stop making it so easy to ignore us, or we'll continue to be ignored.
So I think four things. First of all, pass the Local Government Act reform that's on the papers now, which is to remove the 4 wellbeings and bring councils back on a national basis, back to the core responsibilities. 2, get PENC to deal with that earthquake issue once and for all, because there's huge contingent liabilities both in the council portfolio and across the entire city for people who are going to spend money strengthening buildings that don't need strengthening. Thirdly, get central government to make people come back to the office 4 days a week. We carry the infrastructure in the city and we pay all the bills, but the people aren't coming into the city to spend. And the last one is the social housing. I really want to stress, none of the social housing thing is about displacing a single person from a social housing unit. They can stay in it. And that's entirely fair and appropriate. I want to make sure no one leaves with that implication. But that portfolio should go across to central government.
One other point, because I think one of the challenges that we see around the country, or that's different here compared to the other parts of the country, is that I think it's important as well that our elected members, when they are looking after Wellington's interests, are willing to put aside some of their personal views. Now, I don't necessarily agree with absolutely everything that's been said on this panel tonight, and that's healthy. That's how things work. I could have very easily said, I don't want to be part of this panel because of the 9 things that were said, 2 of them I didn't agree with. Super easy to throw your toys on that front, but I think there's a real need to be able to go take a step back, and I mean literally everyone in that elected position, and go, look, I might have to swallow a slightly dead rat here, but if there is a better outcome coming through, then let's get it going, because a bit more momentum in Wellington is a hell of a lot better than being technically right, but not actually moving ahead. Because again, you look across a lot of councils in New Zealand, I'm not sure that everyone thinks that they are the best things since sliced bread. But what is clear is that for some way, they seem to be able to get a little bit more cohesion to move things forward. We seem to fill the headlines with a lack of cooperation. And I'm sure that actually below it, there's a heck of a lot that could happen, but we spend a lot more time, it seems, sometimes navel-gazing than getting the action going. Strip away the egos, just get some stuff going.
Another question relating to rates. Should they be capped, the increases?
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. There are other regions or areas internationally where rates are capped. I think there obviously needs to be some flexibility. Things can happen where you do need to spend money perhaps above the cap, but you should have to go cap, and the council should have to go cap in hand, either to an independent body and or ratepayers, explain why they're going above the cap, what it's for, what the consequences are, what the impact on rates is, and then there's a decision made. So some sort of mechanism for a bit of flexibility, but I think it would be, along with the changes to the Act, a really good discipline to focus in on the things that matter most.
Can I take the contrary view? Not because I necessarily think that the rates should be out of control, don't get me wrong, but for 2 reasons. One, I worry a little bit about what you'd cap rates on. A lot of people in the audience probably say we should do it on inflation. Do you know how many bananas the council buys? Because it's very different what local councils spend on otherwise. Now, I only say that because over time we've seen time and time again in New Zealand where we haven't spent enough on the critical areas, and clearly, especially in Wellington, they've gone to hell at various points. That means that you've got to spend the right money, and that's, I guess, the difference coming through. Because really, for me, I worry that be it, you go through a mechanical calculation that Stats NZ does, or something that government sets out in regulation, I worry that that is too much of an artificial cap that comes through. That means we might not start to spend the right things in the right areas, because in some parts of Australia where they have capped rates, they had to eventually go cap in hand to the state government and say, please bail me out. Wellington as a city, We elect leaders that then go and do things on our behalf. That's what we're currently asking for, is the current numbers that are in front of us. That is the beauty and the scourge of democracy. And I guess my point would be, rather than trying to put an artificial cap on, which means that we shuffle it off and let the spreadsheets do it, then I would much rather that actually we took some responsibility personally and at all levels, that actually said, look, this is what I'm asking for. I'm voting for the people that I want to deliver certain things. And if that's what the populace in general wants, that's what it gets. But saying, I think, at the moment that things have gotten out of control, we've asked for this as a city. This is where we have gone. And if we want something different, we must ask for something different.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. I agree with that.
No, we're
I
not
agree.
having a political meeting. That'll come later. We just want to hear from our ideas generators here in the election campaign. You can take the ideas and debate them then. What I'd like to do now is just move to the wrap-up and ask each of the panel to give a take-out, what's been most important for them, both from tonight but also from the future. What would you like to see happen as we do move into this more political phase? Starting right across.
I don't mind starting. I think the most powerful person in Wellington right now is the new CEO of Wellington City Council. He's come in, he has a chance to basically listen to the citizens, because look, with respect to the mayoral candidates here and the councillors, councils are run by the executive. Let's be realistic here. So he's got a chance, right? He's got a chance to reset. And I put up there on the slide before what the strategic focuses are in how they've been published in the past. The council has got to publish a pre-election briefing very shortly now. That will be a really interesting document. It'll be really interesting to see whether he is just going to continue on with the vision that we've had for the last 5 to 8 years, or whether he's going to try and reset. Because if he doesn't buy into the need to change and brings his leadership team along with him, then change will be very, very hard to achieve.
Thank you. Louise.
Thank you. I'm just going to say, look, your voice and your vote absolutely matters. By your voice, I mean write letters to the editor. You will have seen my name in a few of late. I've turned into my grandmother. But it matters. People read them. Write to your MP, write to your councillors. Definitely vote in the next election. We do have an uphill battle because we do have central party politics meddling in our domestic voting elections. So it does tilt the playing field. But your vote absolutely matters. So please, get active and absolutely vote, because we need change in Wellington. And I really loved Julie's phrase. I would like to see Wellington again be the envy of New Zealand.
Yeah. Julie.
I think interesting. The only thing I would say is I think the fact that Vision Wellington have sort of, prompted these discussions, and, I've been to a number of these events, and there's some incredible people, I say for our small population, and, I've seen these people and I see them on a daily, weekly basis in my business. So I think Wellington, and I think what Louise said, people, we need to speak out of how we feel. We need to vote. And I think, I feel positive that, we are going to have change in this coming election. We can only hope that they, they're invested and they care about Wellington. What we need is people that care about Wellington, and we put aside all the political side of things. And I think we've got some good people in Wellington, so I feel like it will be come right.
That'll be great.
It's clear that Wellington has all the right ingredients to get back to that awesome place that we've gone. We've got all the solid economic foundations and similar. We've just got to be willing to make some tough but important short-term choices so we're set up better for the long term. That means making a priority list and saying that actually we can't do and be everything to everyone. That is difficult, but that's what everyone does in their daily lives, be it for business, households or otherwise. You make those difficult decisions because you know there is a better payoff over time. It sets you up for the future. But I think really part of it should be that when people like Julie come up with a plan like she had, that we back them to the absolute hilt. That should be the minimum that we require in this city. Again, across the board, be it from central government, local government, or other businesses that go, that person's got a good idea, let's not figure out all the ways to make it difficult and not return their phone calls. Let's show up with the bottle of champagne and go, actually, how can we help make this better? Because it's by backing people like Julie and that work that Wellington will sort of prosper in the place that it can be again. We've got the foundations, we need to make some tough decisions, but we can absolutely do it if we back people who are willing to put their neck on the line and make things better for us.
Thank you. It's been a great panel, thank you, but I now hand over to Neil to wrap. Neil Pavia-Smith, our host for tonight.
Well, thank you, Fran. I think the summaries don't need to be re-articulated by me. Vision for Wellington set up, as I said at the get-go, because a number of us feel frustrated that Wellington is not where we think it could be. And one of our members used a great line. There's a lot of focus on how we've got here. We know what we're sort of running away from, but we need to identify what we're running to. And the idea around all of these panels, which have been in the public, free-flowing and all of those sort of things, is to get the ideas flowing, to get people engaged around, what are some of the great ideas that can be encapsulated in a vision statement, in a vision document, which we're going to be working on and trying to produce, that captures all of the great ideas that have come through. And I think what I'd say is that while some of the content, some of the ideas, some of the material might be a bit confronting, it may not be something you personally agree with, the best ideas come from constructive debate around the evidence and the ideas and so on. And so, for all of what's been heard and discussed tonight and at other panels and so on, I think what it's doing is forcing out and giving people an opportunity to express views around what they want to see in the city. I think we all agree we could be doing a whole lot better, and it's about how we can try and take all these ideas and try and distill that down into something that's able to be achieved and so on. I'd really like to once again thank you all for coming along tonight and being so engaged. We said we'd wrap it up at 7:15. I figure that we could have probably kept going, but I know a number of you probably need to get away. But there are drinks and so on still going on at the bar here, and thank you to Mike Egan and Fergus from Bulcott Bistro for arranging all of that for us. Most importantly, thank you to our panel, to Fran, who again does it in her sleep, this moderating business, and with the sort of real guidance and being able to contain the conversation onto the key things. Brad, who I think again, when I introduced him as a 28-year-old, packing his life in pretty quickly, but the real passion he has as a young Wellingtonian to want to be here, for more people like him to be here, to want to live their lives here and participate with great excitement and enthusiasm. But his thoughts around the raw ingredients of the city and the region are here to make this fantastic. Julie, who's authentic, at the coalface portrayal of real business conditions for a company that's not a startup, it's not a tech thing, it's not all that sort of creative sector and all of those things that seem to get lots of support and subsidy, but a 100-year-old business that we all know, and the opportunities for it to be even greater, which have been stalled because of frustrations about dealing with bureaucracy who won't engage. And so Julie's real insights there, quite valuable, because this is what matters. $30 million, 50 extra jobs, a unique experience in Wellington or in New Zealand. And then, of course, Paul and Louise, who I introduced as, you can see respectively, the decades of financial insights and experience, and the work they've done in being able to identify, how we've got to the situation we have, but more importantly, what could we do about it? So it's all very well to get up and say, well, complain, and so on. But Louise, in her presentation, had with Paul's support, I know they've worked together on that, has had the courage to come up and say, well, if you aggregated all of that up, here's as much as $2.8 billion over a decade. That doesn't mean we're cutting and slashing and so on and so forth. It's spending smarter. It's reallocating, it's reprioritising, it's putting money where we could really shift the dial. And that's the kind of conversation, debate that needs to happen. And of those political people here, and there's a lot of you, I hope you take that seriously. I hope you are engaged around these ideas, because you heard tonight when that stuff was going on, people were very animated about it. It means something. We're all experiencing the pain of rates, business pressures and so on. And so please make that a real issue in the election. So please join me in thanking our wonderful panel.